Multiple versions. Okay, multiple versions of the Quran.
No, I don't believe that the Quran that you have now. I believe that all Muslims agree currently on what the Quran, what they believe is the canon Quran. However,
when is this belief from?
Huh?
Is this belief only decided today, 5 years ago, by the United Muslims of the world?
It's from a long time.
How long?
It was the first consolidation was after, what's his name? I'm so sorry. Part of it is because I don't speak Arabic and it's very difficult for me to remember Arabic words and names. So I don't remember the name, but I know it's over 1,000 years.
This belief is the collective consensus of all the Muslims around the world. There is only one Quran that the Prophet ﷺ left behind, and this Quran has been being read all over the world by the Muslims. So even though there might be slight differences because the Quran was transmitted by the Prophet from God in multiple readings. So to give an example, Maliki Yawmiddin and Maliki Yawmiddin, there's a difference. But both of the differences are from God. Muslims all alike agree on that. So when we say there's only one Quran and you say there's multiple versions of the Quran, you'll be going against the consensus of the Muslim body of general Muslims, scholarly Muslims, consensus all along the history from day one to today.
Yes,
right?
I understand that.
So,
sir, my problem is not with Muslims. My problem is not with the Islamic nation. My problem is not with you.
is it with Islam and the Quran?
My problem is with the accuracy of the Quran in terms of history.
Let's talk about that a little bit.
Yeah.
So the Quran claims it's a revelation from God.
Yes.
The same God that revealed to Moses the prophet, Jesus the prophet, and other prophets. Peace be upon them all.
Yes.
So the Quran claims that. It's the same God that has revealed revelations before and has now revealed the final revelation to Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So when you want to talk about the accuracy, what do you have in mind that the Quran is inaccurate about?
Well, it says that the war reclaiming Saudi Arabia when he was, or Mecca when he was, not Mecca, oh my goodness, the
Kaaba?
The Kaaba, yes.
What does the Quran say about it?
Yes. I believe the Quran says that it was a war of defense to reclaim it for the one God, correct? And
Carry on anyway. I don't know why it says that. So
okay.
So
well, please correct me.
So what exactly is
it?
it?
That you know much more about.
No. As we expect, Muslims should know about the Quran, Christians should know about the Bible. Okay, this is a given thing. It should be right.
Yeah.
Otherwise, what kind of believers are we if we don't know the basics of our religion, of our scripture? So, what an example of inaccuracy is it that you were trying to put forward?
What I was able to read from historians and archaeologists was that the wars that were enacted by Muhammad were very violent, and that although he was a leader of a nation and can't necessarily be blamed for violence, he did have a war of conquest, and it is contradictory with what it claims in the Quran. And so
How is it contradictory in the Quran?
The Quran says that it was a war of peace, and that
Where does it say that?
Nation,
it doesn't say anywhere in the Quran it is a war of peace.
Okay, then I am wrong.
Sure. So let's take up another example of inaccuracies that you may have in mind. Because if something has convinced you away from Islam, there has to be really issues which were really doubtful, and then you were convinced away from it to something else.
Right.
So. Some other examples.
One of the arguments for the validity of the Quran was scientific examples of knowledge that couldn't have been known at that time, but since it had been revealed from God, then it must be divinely inspired knowledge and must not come from man because man couldn't have known that particular scientific fact. That's a common argument for the validity of a text being divine.
No, this is an argument a lot of Muslims make.
Yes.
Yeah, but
lots of Christians make
is that what the Quran says, though?
No. I'm getting to that. The Quran makes a claim about the nature of conception and where. Are you familiar with this? This argument for the validity of the Quran is that in
Surah number 23.
Is it? Thank you.
Surah Al-Mu'minun.
Yes. There is a description. Okay, can I? Okay, thank you. I'm sorry. I'm a part of a class, and I have a limited amount of time here.
Everyone else left.
Take your time. It's preparing during discussion.
We're hanging with you.
They will stay a little bit longer.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah,
Thank
they will
you.
stay longer
Sorry.
because it's an interesting discussion.
Yes. And I was and I rejoiced in that argument because I think that that's very convincing. But when I read it for myself, and I gotta admit, I had to translate it to English from the original.
No problem.
But I didn't find that particular argument convincing.
What was the
For
argument?
The argument that the Quran had pre-biological knowledge of the biological nature of conception and birth, of where sperm comes from. It said sperm comes from somewhere in the spine, rather. You know what I mean?
No, it doesn't. Anyway, so I do know what I mean.
Yeah.
So this is an argument. Nabil Qureshi made a video. I used to watch his as well. Poor fellow.
Who made a video?
Nabil Qureshi once made a video on this issue about the very issues about sperm.
I haven't.
Yeah. So you haven't probably read or looked at all this.
I've read
Yeah.
his essays, but I
Sure.
have not watched his videos.
Unfortunately, for him, even as a medical doctor, he should have realized the Quran doesn't make that argument. So what the Quran says is not like the sperm comes from between the backbone and the ribs. It talks about how the two arguments are made, how man emanates from these two places. So when you look at let me simplify it. When you look at during birth, the child in the abdomen or the womb of the mother is actually exactly in between these two structural places. Because when you have like a cylinder, our reference point are, if you have a cylinder, what's our reference point? It's like from this perspective, from the center.
The center and then the radius.
Yeah. No. From front to back, from this angle.
Oh, the diameter. Okay.
No. The front to the back, anterior and posterior. In medical terms, this is what we would use to say this is anterior to this organ, posterior to this organ, in front of or in back of, so that in a cylinder you can pinpoint its position.
Okay.
So the baby indeed comes from between the backbone and the ribs, because that's where it's coming from, anterior and posterior. So the Quran hasn't made any scientific error of any kind or any sort. And what it does in the beginning, it does show something very interesting, that this sperm, actually it doesn't talk about sperm only, it talks about mimma dafiq, which is a gushing fluid,
Yes.
which is self-emitting. And what we know now, within this gushing fluid, this sperm is self-motile. So that's something that you have to say the Greeks and the Romans
Would not
and the
have known,
Hindus
right.
would not have known. So you would say that this is certainly interesting, because in Arabic, I'm not going to go into the grammar, but very simply just saying, you would have normally said ma'un madfuq. Yeah, ma'un madfuq. But the Quran
In
says
English, that means something very different. But yes.
but it says ma'un dafiq, means the water itself is doing itself motion, self-emitting motion. So not only this is something that wouldn't have known, and it's very precise today, and there is no error in the description of the Quran when it comes to the birth of the child. So, have you heard of a person called Jonathan McLatchie?
No, I have not.
Okay, he came here again, now doing a PhD of some kind. I very much wanted to discuss this because it's interesting to have a discussion with someone who are man or woman of knowledge in that very field. Like if Nabil Qureshi was well today, I would have had the same discussion with him, rather than someone who's not in the medical field.
Could you actually could you
so-
give me the names of I'd like to do, I have to leave, but I'd like to do further research on this, and you were citing a lot of
Sure. We will towards the end, but I want to know what other things that intellectually really led you away. So what are the things that you found in the Quran that is really not quite right?
well, yeah, you're
Because you mentioned, remember, a lot of points, so I want to pick from those points and tell me, okay, I mentioned this is why.
Unfortunately, because what I will give you an argument, and then I believe that then it will be your turn to defend against the argument. But unfortunately, I have to go, and so rather than give you another argument, can you please-
Not another argument. The same arguments that you've made already, just because I don't want to go through every single one of them, and I don't remember all of them because my memory isn't that good. That's why I use notepad like yourself exactly.
Yeah,
So.
Yes.
Remind yourself and say what are the things that you said that really convinced you out of Islam.
Okay. Islam is sponsors a works-based gospel.
Islam is?
A works-based salvation.
Not really.
The fact that that in order to go to heaven, that it is your deeds and it is your following of the law that determines whether or not you are a good person.
Actually,
and it believes that people can be made good if they do good deeds.
Okay. Do you know just to understand the Islamic position on this?
Yes, sir. I do want to understand.
No, I want to. No. My sister.
I have to leave.
You will leave,
sorry.
but I want to respond to this very quickly because there's a statement of the Prophet, sallallahu alaihi wasallam.
Okay, I'm so sorry. We're going to be late.
But can I make this response in 1 minute?
I can't. I
1
didn't
minute.
want to start it. I'm sorry.
Just 1 minute, and the response is this anyway. The companions of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam asked about, how are we going to? Do we go to paradise with our deeds? He says no. He says, just paraphrasing, not even you. He says no, not even me, unless Allah showers His grace on me, His mercy and grace on me. So we go to paradise through the fadl of Allah, from the grace of Allah, from the mercy of Allah, not because of our deeds. So this is again total misconception by our Christian friends in humanity. Unfortunately, they have to go. But if we did continue, you would have realized, point by point, every single reasons they may have had against Islam and accepting Islam are actually very weak and not even valid at all. But obviously now I'm just speaking to myself, there's no point any further to continue.
James says the faith without deeds is useless.
Yeah. So it is not it is not uncommon that when you see a conversation like this becoming interesting, that people have to go for obvious reasons. They have meetings. Maybe another time, God willing, we'll continue the discussion.
Could you talk about will someone make a decision based on emotion?
Where's the brother? No, he's coming.
Are you with him? Yeah, I know.
Emotion should drive our intellect. Right. This is an example where I will talk against. Outside the camera. Conversation is over. You see, one of our arguments from our Jewish brothers. Finished? How Hitler